Now, this is public television, and I'm sure that our audience is all enlightened out there, but I'm guessing there's at least one man on the other side of that camera who still thinks women should not be in elective office, particularly in the White House. What would you say to this man?
I say that, man, crawl back into your cave and or under the rock that you came from. Take a good look. Yeah, yeah. Wake up. Smell the roses, smell the coffee, get with it, to chill out, whatever. If you're not aware of the fact that women are here to stay in just about every aspect of life, I take pity on you.
There are more women candidates running for political office this year than at any recent time in memory, at least high-profile women candidates. Do you think that's a fundamental change? Is this truly the year of the woman in politics?
Well, let's certainly hope so, Gary. I firmly believe, though, that it's a fundamental change. I don't mean to take this lightly. We've seen women all along. I ran in 1956, and it was very nice, but it was an aberration, I'm sure. Other women have run state legislatures, but this year is an explosion. This is a cultural revolution. This is phenomenal. And if this doesn't have an impact, I don't know what would. Of course, it was all due to the Clarence Thomas, not all due to the Clarence Thomas, but that certainly focused our attention on the way women were not being perceived. So, yeah, this is not the year of the woman or the decade of the woman. I think it's likely to be the century of the woman. Let's make it a big one.
Why is it
and we
important?
have fine women candidates. That's not a woman because she's a woman. I think often we say, oh, she's a woman, you know, let's vote for her. Oh, no, no, no. There have been women candidates that should have been defeated. But the ones I'm looking at now, at least in the Democratic Party, I don't know about the Republican women candidates, are exceptionally well qualified, fine candidates, yeah.
Why is it important? I mean, aside from the obvious that women deserve to have representation in Congress or anywhere else for that matter, why is it important that women be in politics?
Oh, you know the answer to that, Gary. They shed an unusual light on many aspects of our society. Women do care more about nurturing, about education, about health care, about family values. Men do, of course. Fathers are great. But women are out there working. They're the mothers, they're the teachers. They see things just a little bit differently and, to my perspective, better. As one of few women in the Illinois General Assembly, I often wonder what was wrong with all these people. Why couldn't they see in those days it was equal pay for equal work? But we're still talking about that, only now we call it pay equity. So we think we've come a long way. There's still an awful long way to go. Lots of things need to be corrected. I think when women saw that Clarence Thomas hearing again, it's on my mind, that row of white men, and one half of them for sure trying to persecute Anita Hill for daring to tell this story about sexual harassment out in the open. Women just vigorously reacted. Women in Carbondale have written to Paul the most painful letters it must have been for them to write, saying, while watching that hearing, all of a sudden a good friend of ours said she burst into tears. Her husband said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I've never told you, but 25 years ago something happened to me that was so bad I've repressed it, kept it in my memory." She said it all came flooding back. This happened many, many times, according to letters, according to phone calls that we've received. So the depth of the feeling for Anita Hill is very, very strong, and that is carried over into the political scene.
A common lived world is that most women share, you think?
A lot of women share it in one way or another. Professional women share it in not getting the glass ceiling, so-called, kind of prevents us from moving all the way up. Working women see it in not getting advancements. It's out there. And if the men aren't going to help us correct it, then I think the women are going to have to do the job.
There are some people who would say, well, you may well be a woman, but you, for lack of a better phrase, you sort of act like a man, that a woman in politics has to be even more of a
Oh, no, no,
hard
no, no.
guy.
Even I think the opposite is true. A woman in politics has to look like herself. And she shouldn't wear a man suit. She shouldn't wear a tie, bow tie, or whatever. She should try and project herself as realistic. I think Geraldine Ferraro comes across not as a male politician. When she ran for vice president, she was very feminine, had her children around her, wore lovely clothes. It seemed to me she was trying to say, I'm a woman, hey, but I can also do this job. And I think that's part of it. And I think people realistically look at all candidates now and say, is this person good for the job? Not, is this woman going to do a good job, or how will this man fit into it? Men can be nurturing, heavens. They can do all those good things, but there's something special about women.
When Pat Schroeder, I think it was when she pulled out of her race.
Shed a few tears, yeah.
And we talked about it. The media all talked about it.
She would love to forget that, I'm sure. Maybe it would have been better if Pat Schroeder, in leaving the race, just sent out a press release rather than going before a camera. Cameras are very stressful.
But why can't we cry? Or for
why
that
can't
matter,
men
why
cry?
can't, well,
Yeah.
there you go.
All right.
Was it Eugene McCarthy or Muskie who cried? And that removed him from the race.
And someone said it was just snow that he was wiping away that had melted on his face. I don't know. But I think it was wonderful that he did care enough about Jane Muskie to say, hey, these people up here in New Hampshire are for the birds, and let's get on with it. But that's what they remember about Mr. Muskie. That's true.
But crying seems to be a weakness. That's how we see it anyway. Or, in the case of Pat Schroeder, well, she's a woman, women cry.
Yeah.
Can we talk about women in politics beyond what have become?
I think we're getting beyond that. We didn't see Dianne Feinstein cry, or Barbara Boxer, or Lynn Yackel. And Lynn Martin, in losing, and she was literally crushed by Paul Simon in that last election, didn't cry, came out of it very nicely with a great deal of grace. And I think that's what we're looking for in the long run, is how do you take a loss? Paul has lost a primary for governor. And you got to take it, I don't want to say like a man, take it like a woman, take it like a person who knows what he or she is up to. Let's face reality, like Alan Dixon went out in a classy style. When he conceded defeat to Carol Moseley Braun, he did the best speech of his life, perhaps. Everyone acknowledged that. And I thought, hey, Alan, you were my colleague in the Illinois General Assembly. You did a fine job there.
You mentioned Carol Moseley Braun.
Right.
Your husband, who has a long friendship and political relationship with Al Dixon. So do you. No doubt felt that he wanted to support Senator Dixon in his re-election bid.
He did.
I have to guess, though, that at the dinner table for months before all of that, there were some discussions about who he should support and to what extent.
Certainly we discussed it, and Paul early on said that he was going to support Alan. He was his colleague. He'd known him for more than 30 years, longer than he's known me. I said, hey, Alan was my colleague in the Illinois General Assembly. He sat ahead of me. Paul and Alan, I remember, sat ahead, and we watched each other vote in late night sessions, often in Springfield. I feel a true relationship to Alan and to his wife Jody and to their children. I did not campaign for Carol Moseley Braun in the primary because of my long-standing friendship and affection and esteem that I have for Alan Dixon.
But you would have liked to?
I won't say. No comment on that. But I strongly have been strongly supporting Carol since the primary, and so has Paul. When Carol was here in Carbondale not too long ago, we had a very energetic, enthusiastic meeting. I was very proud that Paul introduced her. When we marched in the parade in Steelville on July 4th, it was Paul and Carol walking together down the main street of Steelville. So when the election is over, primary or whatever, you join hands, close ranks, and say, let's get on with the job. And that's what Paul's doing.
As you mentioned earlier, there are, 5 women that I can think of anyway.
At least 5 great, strong candidates right now. There may be more in the Democratic Party. Yeah.
What will your feeling be if the majority of them don't win, if all of them don't win?
Hey, you're really putting a bad face on this. We'll say we got to try harder the next time.
Well, aside from that, I mean, that's obvious.
Yeah.
But what will your feeling be about the year of the women, this watershed change?
This watershed would not be a watershed then. But it seems fairly true. We're going to get somebody out of that. Now, we may not get all 5.
Geraldine Ferraro, of course, was a vice presidential nominee.
She was truly a watershed person. It was wonderful to be in San Francisco the night of that convention. That was Paul's. Paul was in a part of a showcase of potential senators. As a matter of fact, Paul had about 3 minutes to speak at that convention. Not enough. But the night when Geraldine Ferraro made her acceptance speech was one of the most thrilling that I will remember for a long time. We were so proud of her.
Obviously, the Mondale-Ferraro ticket had problems beyond that. That certainly didn't cause
Didn't cause it. Looking back,
were we ready for a woman as a vice presidential nominee?
Well, the women were certainly ready, the women's groups. But sometimes I perceive women are their own worst enemy. Like, for instance, I can't be that person, so I don't want her to be successful either. There's a little bit of that feeling sometimes with women.
Why do we have to be ready for these things?
Hey, that's life, I guess. Minorities always have been put down by saying, you know, we're not ready for this minority, whether it's Native Americans or blacks or Hispanics or Asians, we're not ready to accept them into regular society. Hey, they've had to fight their way.
Well,
Women,
that's
the same
maybe
thing.
a good metaphor. You mentioned minorities. There's a certain sense, a very clear sense among minorities, that there's an indignity about the second-class citizenship there, even though all the laws are there, all the affirmative action programs.
Right.
Do women share that sense of indignity about not being full citizens?
I don't think we regard ourselves, I don't think it's indignity, it's just we've got it coming and we're going to fight for it. But no, we are not a minority. Actually, women are a majority. So we can't truly place ourselves, it's simply a different, the gender bias, whatever it is from time immemorial has been out there.
Well, let's go back to Anita Hill. You mentioned the Clarence Thomas hearings and all of that.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, there's no sense in worrying about the one word, indignity, but the indignity of it all, I think, is what struck a lot of people.
It did strike a lot of people that the Republicans, Arlen Specter, Orrin Hatch, Alan Simpson, seemed to be piling on this woman. The Democrats were trying to find out what happened. The Republicans on the committee were acting like the state's attorneys or district attorneys. Let's accuse. It was as though she were on trial for something.
Was that a galvanizing moment?
Yes, it certainly was. I did not miss a minute of that hearing. One of the few perks that a Senate wife gets is the ability to walk into a committee room and get at least a place to stand. That's all I had, but at least I had it. No one asked me to leave, so I could watch that whole hearing, not from the back of the hearing room, but from the front, up where the photographers were and some of the guards and some of the press people. So I could watch Anita Hill, watch her face. I could watch Clarence Thomas. I could see how they were acting and reacting to these questions, and I felt that I really had a great spot in history.
What did you think at the time?
I thought, Anita Hill, you are doing such a superb job. Why can't these people see that you are telling the truth? You have done it so coolly and calmly. And then people said, well, maybe if she had cried, we would have believed her more. People wanted her to act more like a woman. Let's face it, she was doing a wonderful job. As a woman, as a lawyer, as a law professor, as a member of a minority, she was superb. The fact that she has caused this cultural revolution to take place, which Paul incidentally writes about in a new book that he's published recently.
Advice and Consent.
Advice and Consent, the intriguing history of the Supreme Court nominations, a very timely book. And again, a lot of people are going to read it just to see what Paul has to say about Clarence Thomas and what he says about Judge Bork. But they also ought to read about the whole history of Supreme Court nominations, how the Senate should give advice and consent. It's advice and consent. It's not just consent. It's not a rubber stamp.
Go back to those Senate hearings.
Oh,
Put yourself back in that room.
All right.
What was your sense of emotion at the time?
My emotions were so high. I was talking to people when we had a break. I say, how do you think she's going? They say, well, she seems to be doing very well, but those questions are bad. Should she do more? Should we bring in Angela Wright? At one point, Eleanor Smeal, who used to be the president of NOW, grabbed me outside of the hearing room, and it was on a break, and said, don't you think we should coerce Anita Hill into coming back and testifying again? This was at the end of a long weekend. I think this was Sunday evening. I said, yes, I think she ought to come back. I think she's losing somehow. I sense a trend here on these questions. So Eleanor Smeal and I knocked at the door where Anita Hill and a lot of people who were with her and said, please, we don't want to interfere, we don't want to come in, but we strongly feel that Anita Hill should come back and speak to the committee again. And they said, we've decided not to. She has made her case, she has done a good job, and that's it. That was their decision. Maybe by that time they felt the die was cast. I wanted her back badly one more time. I wanted her to explode, I guess.
But nonetheless, there was that galvanizing moment.
There was that moment.
The Year of the Woman.
Yeah, that was it.
In the Year of the Woman, why not a woman on one of the major party tickets?
Why not? There certainly is, it's not because we lack good women. In time, Ann Richards certainly would be wonderful. Madeline Kunin, who used to be the governor of Vermont, a wonderful, fine person. Jerry Brown's sister, who was the treasurer of the state of California, a wonderful young woman, dynamic. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of her someday. It's not because we don't have them. Maybe we should wait and have a woman run for president, Gary. Forget this second spot again.
Which may be a while. When Bill Clinton was in Carbondale, this was a year ago, more than a year ago.
More than a year ago, yes, I was there.
He made the comment from the podium that several people had suggested your husband as a possible running mate, and his answer was, well, you know, I was thinking of a Simon on the ticket, but not that one, or something to that effect.
That was a very clever remark. I'm sure.
Was it simply a joke, or
I think it was a nice way of avoiding coming out for Paul Simon. I'm sure he's used that line before, and it got the desired response. Oh, Bill Clinton, you're a nice guy. But it's not unheard of. I'm sure he must have considered women.
But there were none on his short list. Does that give you any second thoughts about the state
yeah,
of the
it does. I think we ought
Party?
to make sure that we have the best possible candidate. Maybe these women that he asked, maybe he's asked some, I don't know, and they decided to stick with the job that they had.
Well, in that vein, we elected a woman to a state office in Illinois last year, Dawn Clark Netsch. And I was told by a local Democratic leader that there was a male candidate who was the sort of, you know, chosen person before that.
I even forget his name.
Tom Homer from Canton.
Oh, you mean in the Democrat?
Yes,
oh, sure.
in the
you
primary.
Mean the primary, Tom Homer.
And a local Democratic leader said to me, well, the reason we got Mrs. Netsch on the ticket after all was Jeanne Simon.
Did he really? I don't think that's a true reason, but I'd like to take a little credit. I certainly pushed for it, but my husband pushed more. Paul did push to have.
But you think it's important to have women on the ticket?
I certainly do.
And women in elective office.
And women who are essentially good candidates, which certainly Dawn, and as you can see, Dawn, as she has turned out to be an excellent comptroller. And if anyone should be thinking about a candidate for governor and looking for a woman in the state of Illinois, Dawn Clark Netsch knows more about Illinois state government than most of the people in Springfield right now. To hear her talk about the state of the comptroller's office and why we're behind in our bills and some of the problems the state faces, I think, Dawn, you've got it made. I only hope the Democratic Party and the people of Illinois can see that the same way.
Well, I hope you don't think this is an unfair question, but if you feel so strongly about women being in elective office, why did you step down from elective office when you married Paul?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. He represented a downstate district. I represented the North Shore of Chicago. He was also a newspaper publisher. He didn't have the 14 that he eventually wound up with, but he did have 3 or 4 newspapers. Now, you can't move a printing press around. I was a lawyer. I am a lawyer. I will always be a lawyer unless I'm disbarred. But I could take my profession with my person to Madison County, which is what I did. I didn't give up being a lawyer when I moved to Madison County. I did give up my residence in that district, that's true. But as it turned out, I got, number one, Paul Simon, someone to work for that I felt really enthusiastic about. I hope someday that Paul would go to Congress. We talked before we were married of going to the Senate. I shared those ambitions with him. And at that time, I didn't see myself going to Congress from the North Shore, which is very, very strongly Republican, as you might know. Still is, for a matter of fact, although they supported Carol Moseley Braun in the last election. But
no regrets then? No regrets about giving up your own political career?
No.
And yet you obviously are very involved.
As long as I can be involved, that's the point. If I had retired to, as Hillary Clinton might have said, baking cookies or having teas, that I would not have chosen, that I wouldn't have.
One of the differences, I think, in the Simon household, I'm told, I've never been to any of these, but particularly in Washington, that in the evenings you hold...
Oh, dinner parties.
Well, not just dinner parties, that involve themselves in discussions about what's wrong with America, study groups,
best part of dinner
groups.
parties. You get these wonderful combinations. You get media people, Gary, like yourself. You get senators and representatives. You get professional people, lobbyists who are, I think, still a good word.
Now, is
get a
this
nice little
different than what other senators might be doing at a dinner party? I have the understanding that
I think it is. I would not like to say we're truly unique, but it is focused. I try and pull people together. They may not know each other, but they all have some interest.
This is your idea?
Oh, you bet, yeah. But we sit around, sit around the dinner table, and I do the dinner, of course. I hate caterers. I don't hate them, but it's more fun not having someone in the kitchen to bother with.
There is a caterer vote out there, don't
there? Sorry about that. I do like to cook. I don't
so you
incidentally give out recipes.
The discussion on a topic?
Well, no. Paul goes around the table. We stay at the dinner table, which you got everybody together at a big table. Paul goes around and says, now, if you were Secretary of State, Mrs. Adams, whatever, how would you look at the Yugoslavian situation? What could we do there? Well, this sort of takes everybody by surprise, but not everybody doesn't get the same question. Paul has a different question worked out, or I do, for each person in the room. And you get this marvelous combination of ideas. Then we always do a poll. Who do you think is going to be the candidate for this, that, or the other office? And we tally that up. You know, I'm for so-and-so. I think Cuomo won our straw poll for presidential candidate. That's the last time we had a dinner party doing that. But that makes it kind of fun. And people really start... I remember E.J. Dionne saying, Washington Post reporting, this is a lot of fun. He sort of sat back and rolled up his sleeves and kind of dug into the whole thing. So I enjoy that. Yeah.
Has this become a Washington tradition? Are people aware that these dinner parties?
I think some people are aware, but I would not like to say it's going to be in the Washington Post style section. But it's our way of bringing people to our home to talk, people that we like, that we think will like each other.
And does this affect the senators' thinking?
Sure it does. Sure. You get a lot of different opinions around the room.
Are there women in history, or for that matter in current political affairs, that you look to as what women should aspire to or hold as models?
My role model was and is still Eleanor Roosevelt. Now she's been gone a long time, but women still, I think, look back to this woman who didn't have a higher education as we look at it today, didn't have a profession, and yet left a profound impact on social services and what one woman could do. And after her husband died, I think she assumed even greater stature in the United Nations in all her advocacy for women and children's rights there. But the big thing about Eleanor Roosevelt is that I met her one time, a long time ago. I was a candidate the first time, and I was asked to be on, first thing, I was asked to be on a television program. I'd never done that before, and I was asked to be on with Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, the prospect of both of these things just filled me with a great deal of trepidation. And I told Mrs. Roosevelt that before the program started. Don't worry, dear, she said, it will be all right. And it was. It was grand because she knew what she was doing, and she made me feel very, very comfortable. So I have a very warm spot for Eleanor Roosevelt. I wish that young women today had similar role models. I don't see quite that woman of that stature. But I do know that our daughter was profoundly affected by the candidacy of Geraldine Ferraro. Geraldine Ferraro spoke at a luncheon meeting of Senate Democratic wives not long after her defeat. And I asked Sheila to come to the luncheon. I noticed a great many women brought their daughters along, and the daughters really responded to Geraldine Ferraro. I see the same thing happening now as Carol Moseley Braun moves around Illinois, that young women are looking at Carol and saying, hey, she's really something very special. And I think we ought to listen to her and keep her in mind.
Women are bringing other women along.
Bringing other women, younger women.
And there's now more of a feeder system of working women into the minor leagues?
I think we realize that we just don't spring out overnight, that we have to work our way up as everybody else does. State legislatures, school boards, library boards, involvement in volunteer activities. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can do it. I don't think Lynn Yackel in Pennsylvania ever held elective office, but she was certainly familiar with all the issues of the day and ran a good campaign.
Well, Harris Wofford was never an elective.
That's right, Harris Wofford wasn't. He worked with John Kennedy, though. Paul and Harris Wofford met a long, long time ago. Let's see, Harris Wofford was running the Peace Corps at that time. And he called up one morning and asked Paul if he'd like to go to Tanzania to direct the Peace Corps there. And for one lovely, crazy morning, we thought, wouldn't it be fun to go to Tanzania? We could take our young children along. They could learn the language. And then we said, no, Paul's and our decision was to stay in Illinois to work. Paul was then running for the state senate. We would have to have given that up. But it was an interesting challenge anyhow.
Do you have a daughter who might be in politics someday?
Well, I certainly hope so. Sheila is I think, exceptionally well qualified. But she's happy practicing law with her Colvin and O'Neill right now. She has a daughter, and I hope that our granddaughter will also go to law school, so there'll be a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter. I think that might be the first time in Illinois history. Why not Sheila Simon for president someday? Or Riley Knope? How about that, Gary?
Jeanne Simon, you're a wonderful asset to Southern Illinois. We're proud to have you here in McAnda.
Thank you. I'm always happy to be in McAnda, and I appreciate that compliment.
A VHS copy of this program is available by sending $19.95 check or money order to WSIU TV. Please include the date of broadcast.